Today we're going to look at part 2 of our kale grow along for winter, and we're going to be looking today at potting them on from this size up to this size. These are around a sort of 2.5 by 3.5 inch pot roughly. These ones have been growing for just over 2 weeks now and have been under lights for myself because I've got so much issue with the flea beetles here. If you've grown yours outside, then you might find that they're not quite as leggy. So because mine have had to deal with a bit more heat than brassicas like, they are a little bit stretched, but we're going to deal with that in a minute as we pot them on. You also want to make sure that you check every leaf on top and below for any eggs if you have been growing them outside, because the butterflies may have laid on them, and if you can squash them now, and they will be absolutely tiny eggs, if you can squash them now, then they won't cause us any further issues as long as we can get them into an area that's a bit more protected or keep an eye on them from now. If you haven't started your seeds yet and you do want to join in, then do go back to video 1 and check out how to sow them. You still have time. It just may mean that you have smaller kale plants than we do as they establish over winter. We have sowed an average of 2 seeds per sow on these, and for me, I'm going to now thin them out to 1 plant per plug, just to make sure that they can grow as large as possible. But if you are wanting baby leaves, then you're going to leave them in the 2s that they're in. But if you have one like this one that's got 3, then just remove the weaker seedling. For me, the weaker seedling is always the one that is the most leggy, but also the thinnest stem, or maybe the leaves haven't actually developed as you'd expect them to. So if there's anything within them that doesn't look very healthy, the colour or anything like that, then that's the weakest one to remove. Once you've potted them up into this size pot, we're going to be keeping an eye out for roots on the bottom, and they should be in here for maybe 3 to 4 weeks. And then if we don't have any space in the garden, we'll be looking at planting them into a larger pot. So this is a litre pot, and we're doing that to make sure that the plants that are in already in the beds that these are going to follow have the time to mature and finish before these are ready. Brassicas are quite forgiving when it comes to being a little bit pot bound, so don't worry about them too much, but we also don't want them sitting and getting very root bound at the same time. So if you can pot them up, it's definitely a good idea to do so. So here we just have some unsieved peat-free compost. This is the Manor Farm compost that I'm using at the moment. So we want to fill up our pots with the compost and fill it up to the top, pat it down slightly, and then we're going to use the dibber to go down quite deep because these are a little bit leggy. If yours aren't leggy, then you won't need to go quite as deep as I am. And then just push your finger through the bottom, or if you've got a different type, you might need to squeeze it and release them. If your pots are bigger than these, then you might be able to get away with another couple of weeks before you do this. It's not worth, in my opinion, ripping the roots apart just to get them out of the pot at this stage. And then I'm going to thin this down to the strongest seedling. So I'm going to go for the one at the back here. It's more stocky, it's got good leaf set, and the stem is just slightly thicker. When we want to bury them, we're going to bury them up to the seed leaves. So the seed leaves on our seedlings are the ones that all look the same when they very first open. So each plant family will have seed leaves that are very similar or exactly the same. And then these are our true leaves, which are the same shape as the plant will actually produce from now on. So once we've got that plug ready, we're just going to drop that in and pop it down. So we have just enough compost coming up to the top there, and that should give us quite a few weeks now before that needs potting on. And then using a pen or just use a label, make sure that you don't forget to label them, because it's very easy to mistake them. They all look the same. Hopefully your pen works. And they're going to be popped in for some water now to soak up from the bottom. All of what you cut off can also be used now in salads or something like that, so you don't necessarily need to bin them or just pop them in the compost if you don't want to use them like that. This particular one has only grown one really quite weak seedling. You can see the seed leaves are a little bit curled over, and then the true leaves are hardly coming through yet, so I'm just going to pop that one in the compost. That's the kale all watered. They're now going to live outside. I am going to put them in one of the little flexi greenhouses that you can buy cheap, and then I'm going to make sure that they are covered away from the butterflies. I don't seem to be having the same issue with flea beetles now, so hopefully they won't attack them. If they do, I will be taking them inside pretty quickly just to give them a bit of respite, and hopefully those flea beetles will go pretty quick. This is just an old plastic greenhouse that these kales have gone in. The door has broken on the zip, so we've just cut that off, but it's perfect for brassicas because what they don't want is any additional heat. So what we definitely don't want to be doing right now is putting them somewhere and then closing the door even at night. They are very hardy and will do absolutely fine with just the net covering them now. It is important during the cooler months, particularly as it's starting to get colder, but then we also have some days where it's warmer, to really keep an eye on the water level in these pots. Usually we're going to find that our watering is going to be needed not quite as often, and the best way I find to do this is fill the weight of the pot when they are fully watered, and then if they start to get light, then water them at that point. It's far better to underwater them and they'll start to wilt and show us than it is to overwater them, because they'll start to rot and it can be very difficult then to tell that we've done that and not just to continue watering them to try and pet them up again. They shouldn't need feeding now within these pots, and then once they are at the point where their roots have filled out the pot and are starting to poke through the bottom where we can start to see them, it'll be time to pop them up into the larger pot. The next time that we'll be looking at these now are once they have been potted on one more time, and we'll be looking at what to do when we start to think about planting them out. But it's also going to depend very much so on the weather and how the season progresses, and whether or not we're going to be pulling out the tomatoes for myself, which is where they're going to go to follow after, and whether or not we're going to put them in sooner, or whether we're going to need to put them on again in order to make sure that the tomatoes have got as long as possible to continue ripening. We are also doing a winter salads grow along, and we're about to start the winter cauliflower grow along as well. So if you want to join in with those, do please check out those videos.